So is your avoidant actually looking for genuine love with you, or are they just wasting your time? Today, I'm going to help you tell the difference. Hi, I'm Gabriel. I run simplytogether.co with my wife Carolina, and together we help people restore their relationships. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly where you stand with your avoidant. Now, to answer the question, I'm going to walk you through 6 signs that your avoidant is actually looking for love, and I've ordered them with each next sign being more meaningful and hopeful than the one before it. None of them come from a textbook. They come from my own experience as a former avoidant myself, and the patterns I've watched play out with clients of mine time and time again. So here's the simple rule to keep in mind as we go through these. The more of them that apply to your situation, the clearer it becomes that your avoidant is genuinely looking for love and not wasting your time. Sign 1 is that they act detached but still get jealous. This is when they seem completely checked out and uncaring, but the moment you are around other people, something changes in them. I want to tell you about Sarah, a client of mine who came to me genuinely confused about where she stood with her partner, Mark. From the outside, Mark had all the hallmarks, no pun intended, of someone who had emotionally clocked out of the relationship. He was distant, difficult to reach, giving very little away emotionally. And Sarah was starting to wonder whether he even registered that she existed anymore. But then she started to notice something. Whenever she went out socially, a work event, an evening with friends, Mark would find a way to check in. A casual sounding text, a question about who she was with, a comment that came just a little too quickly for someone who supposedly didn't care. Because he was worried she'd meet someone else. And no matter how hard he tried to keep looking detached and uncaring, it just kept resurfacing. Now, here's what most people in Sarah's situation would do with that information. They'd either chalk it up to controlling behavior or dismiss it entirely as mixed signals and move on. But I'd encourage you to sit with it for a little longer than that, because avoidants protect themselves through distance, and they're quite good at it. But jealousy has a way of bypassing that armor entirely. They can train themselves to seem indifferent. They can choose not to reach out, not to engage or show up. But they cannot easily override the discomfort of imagining the person they actually love moving towards someone else. So if your avoidant keeps their guard firmly up in most situations, but visibly tenses when you mention someone showing interest in you, or gets oddly attentive right after you've had a social evening with them, that's a sign your avoidant is actually looking for love, because someone who's just wasting your time doesn't quietly worry about losing you. Sign number 2 is that they keep coming back after pulling away. I'm going to get a little personal here because this one I lived from the inside. I broke up with Carolina, my then girlfriend, more than once during the years before we properly figured things out. And each time something would eventually draw me back in her direction. Not because I'd sat down and made a rational decision that returning was now the smart move, but because there was something underneath all the fear and the avoidance that I genuinely couldn't walk away from, even when I was convinced I was walking away. From where Carolina was standing, I completely get how exhausting and confusing that must have been. Somebody pulls away, comes back, pulls away again. So it makes sense you might wonder whether you're being strung along by someone who simply doesn't know what they want. But here's what was actually happening on my end, and what I see happening with avoidant clients and partners over and over again. Every time I withdrew, it was an attempt to escape a feeling. The fear of becoming locked in and trapped, the anticipation of then being unhappy and not able to leave, the sense that if I stayed long enough, the whole thing would just go south and I would have wasted both hers and my time. But every time I came back, it was because those fears turned out not to be as strong as what I actually felt for Carolina. Avoidants want the same things you want: closeness, connection, a relationship that actually means something. Mostly just slower and with a great deal more internal resistance to work through along the way. Meaning the push-pull can often be them fighting a battle with their own feelings rather than playing games with yours. So if your avoidant has pulled away and then returned and done that more than once, that's a sign they're actually looking for love. A person who is just wasting your time doesn't keep finding themselves coming back to you. Sign 3 is that they make thoughtful gestures or go out of their way for you. Again, I'll use myself as an example here. Verbally expressing how I felt towards Carolina, especially in our earlier days, was genuinely difficult for me in a way I couldn't always explain. My feelings were there, but expressing them was crossing a gap that I just wasn't equipped to cross. I didn't know how to. So I'd put real thought into doing things instead. One evening, for example, fairly early in our relationship, where I'd made a reservation at a restaurant I knew she'd been waiting to try for a while. Nothing over the top, just a place she'd mentioned a few times, but what she didn't know was what was waiting at home afterwards. While she had been getting ready earlier that day, I'd spent a couple of hours setting things up at my apartment: candles, flowers, the whole package. So that when we got home back from dinner, she walked into something that surprised her, and it wasn't just another evening on the couch. So she had no idea it was coming, and I remember watching her being confused for a moment as she walked through the door, as though we had walked into the wrong apartment. But anyhow, we had a lovely evening, and I could tell that the thoughtful gesture made her feel special and important. So if your avoidant is doing things for you, quietly planning, going out of their way, putting thought into gestures, it can be mowing your lawn or fixing your plumbing, things they don't necessarily announce or take credit for. That's a sign that they are actually looking for love. Avoidants who just waste your time don't put in that kind of careful, considered effort. If you're watching this and more than a couple of these are already sounding familiar to you, that's a great start. But if you're having struggles outside of this in your relationship or marriage and would like help with that specifically, we do still coach people one-on-one, and you'll find all the details in the video description below. Now let's keep going, because the next signs are the most significant ones. They open up about things they normally keep buried. So sign number 4 is them telling you things they don't tell most people. A client of mine, I'll call him James, was in the process of reconnecting with an avoidant partner, a woman, let's call her Claire. They'd both been through a rocky stretch that had created some distance between them, and fairly early into reconnecting, Claire did something that genuinely caught James off guard. She started opening up and talked about difficult periods in her past, about going through struggles with depression, about a chapter in her life where she'd leaned heavily on alcohol to get through the days. These weren't things she'd share with people casually. James came to our session unsure whether to feel honored or overwhelmed by that, and honestly, I understood both reactions. But what I explained to him was that what Claire was doing was significant in a way that's easy to underestimate if you don't understand how avoidants operate. Avoidants at their core are self-protective, and that self-protection usually extends to painful parts of their history most of all. They've typically learned somewhere along the way, often early, that showing these parts of themselves invites judgment or rejection, or the particular kind of distance that follows when someone decides you're more complicated than they bargained for. So they keep it locked away, and they get quite practiced at doing so. So when an avoidant starts sharing those things with you unprompted, without being pushed or maybe even asked, what's happening is that they're trying to extend trust again, carefully and deliberately, even if it doesn't look that way from the outside. And trust is the very thing that has to exist before an avoidant can genuinely open up and love at all. So if your avoidant is starting to let you in to those parts of themselves they normally keep hidden, respond with curiosity rather than advice, and warmth rather than alarm. because that kind of openness is actually a sign your avoidant is looking for love and not just passing the time. Sign number 5, they make an effort to grow, even if it's slowly. This is another one I've lived through, so I'll take you back to Carolina and myself. Whenever she tried to bring something up, something that was bothering her, that she needed from me, I would almost immediately shift into defending myself. She had barely finished her sentence before I already was building a case, explaining my reasoning, justifying my behavior. And what that meant in practice was that I turned the conversation from being about what she was actually feeling to whether or not I was to blame. So she never got space to figure out what she was upset about to begin with, because I had already moved the whole conversation to being about me. For Carolina, that pattern was obviously exhausting. She felt unheard, misunderstood, and after a while, like there was simply no point in bringing things up at all. For me, every one of those conversations left me feeling broken and not good enough, which of course only made the defensiveness worse over time. So it took time and it took a lot of effort, but I eventually learned to just stay with what she was saying rather than immediately responding to it, to let her finish, to ask what she needed rather than explain what was going on for me. And gradually, over the months, things changed and improved, though imperfectly and inconsistently at first. But our conversations improved enough that Carolina finally started to feel heard and understood. So if your avoidant is making any genuine effort to grow in some way and change past behaviors, that's a sign that they're actually looking for love. Someone who's just wasting your time doesn't do the uncomfortable work of changing how they show up in a conversation or any other aspect of your relationship. And sign number 6, the most meaningful one on this list, is that they become more consistent over time. I worked with Emma, who came to me with a frustration I hear regularly. Her boyfriend Ryan ran hot and cold in a way that had become increasingly difficult to make sense of. Some weeks he was warm and genuinely showing up, and Emma would feel hopeful in a way that made the other weeks hurt even more. Because the other weeks he would retreat to his apartment, essentially go quiet, declining invitations to spend time with her friends, finding reasons to skip family occasions, becoming someone who was technically still in a relationship with her, but not really participating in it. And Emma would sit with that familiar sinking feeling that everything she thought she'd seen had just been an illusion, that he didn't care. But as we worked together and Emma started paying close attention to the longer arc rather than the week-to-week fluctuations, something became clear. The warm periods were stretching out. The retreating periods were getting shorter. So Ryan kept showing up imperfectly, with bumps along the way, but consistently. There was no period of intense closeness followed by complete disappearance. There was just a slow, uneven, but genuinely progressive increase in presence and him being more reliable. A Saturday with her friends here, a family dinner he actually stayed for. This is the sign I'd want you to hold onto the most firmly, because consistency is, without question, the hardest thing for an avoidant to do over time. Vulnerability is a single moment that takes a particular kind of courage, but it's a one-time effort. Showing up consistently over weeks, months, requires something deeper, an ongoing willingness to stay in it, even when every avoidance instinct is pointing to the exit sign. Most people in Emma's position would have walked away during one of those retreating periods, concluding that Ryan was simply incapable of closeness, and left right before the pattern actually started to shift. And that's one of the most painful things I see. People walking away from a situation that was genuinely beginning to change, simply because they were measuring by the wrong window of time. So if you zoom out, look at the overall shape of things with your avoidant, and the direction, however gradual, if it's trending towards being more reliable and they are more present, that is your clearest sign that they're actually looking for love and not wasting your time. So to summarize, 6 signs that your avoidant is actually looking for love and not passing time with you: the jealousy behind the detachment, the returning after pulling away, the quiet gestures, the openness about painful things, their effort to grow, and their slow but real trend towards consistency. Now, the more of these apply to your situation, the clearer your answer is. And if most of them apply, the next question becomes a practical one. Knowing your avoidant is looking for love is one thing, but what actually makes an avoidant choose specifically you? What tips the scales for them from wanting love in general to committing to one particular person? That's exactly what I get into in the next video. You can watch it here.